Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. I finally managed to bring these two amazing ladies together from completely different parts of the world. Paddy is there in Dubai, Elizabeth is in Austria, and I am here in Barcelona, sweating with the heat, but happy to be here. So, and today we want to talk to you to have this conversation about tackling the biases in the intercultural environment. You can imagine how difficult for us, the three of us here are in the communication business, and we are in a global environment, and we have to face those differences in our daily lives. And even further, we have to manage to communicate and help others to communicate in those challenging intercultural environments. I want to just give to you a brief introduction in my special guests, but I want to give the floor to them because they have a lot to share with you. First, let's go in alphabetical order, so there's no preferences here. Elizabeth is an executive career coach and presentation skills trainer at Strategic Speaking for Results. She helps executives master a message that brings funding, allies, and recognition. Within her 30 plus years of experience as an international opera director, directing such luminaires as Luciano Pavarotti and Placido Domingo, she helps her clients to master a message that brings results. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Tulia. I'm so happy, so honored to be on your show.
The honor is absolutely mine. And Paddy Kennedy is founder, CEO, and principal at Kennedy's Communication Studio International. She is internationally known for her work in global communication and leadership, resulting in swift results and profound growth. Her clients span the globe, coming from over 90 countries. Paddy Kennedy is a thought leader and a thought leader and thought leader in voice and communication, and a professional speaker, and has spoken in more than 20 countries. And me, Tulia Lopez, I am your host and communication architect. My clients are senior leaders in challenging influential positions, especially women in male dominating corporate cultures. And I help them to increase the impact and results every time they speak. I'm also an international speaker and author of Leading in High Heels. And without any further ado, let's get started today with this conversation. Before we were live, we were here already having some spoilers because I was asking these ladies about their challenges in this global world that we live now, and their challenges in developing their work as a communicator, and also their challenging challenges in their own biases towards the people and the environment they are, and their biases towards them. I would like to start now with Paddy. Paddy, you are in Dubai, and for me, I have no experience in this part of the world. Can you introduce us to this topic and share about your story there?
Well, thank you very much. It's really a great joy to finally catch up with you and to be on a show with you. I'm deeply honored, and to join you as well, Elizabeth. So I want to start out by saying thank you and hello to all of our viewers watching. I am a Canadian, and although I've lived in many parts of the world, I've lived in about 10 countries now, from Papua New Guinea and all different kinds of places. But now I find myself for the last almost 4 years in the Middle East. Presently, I'm in Dubai, and I can say that of all of the Middle East that I've been in so far, Dubai is actually the easiest because it's a very open society, and about 89% of the population are expats. So you have, it's very, very open. But 3.5 years in Oman, which is just one of the most beautiful countries in the world. And I really say to everyone, you haven't lived until you've gone to Oman. It is just so beautiful. And the Omani people are lovely. I got caught there, especially during the pandemic. I was actually on my way to Bahrain to do some work, and I ended up getting locked down in a northern town in Oman, and there I was for the last number of years. And I wanted to keep my company, start my company there, and I wanted to register it in Oman. Now, as a woman my age, I'm now 70 years of age. So when I was there, I was like 67, 68, and I was trying to get a visa. And I was like, no, because you're too old. You're a widow. So you're here all by yourself. What does that mean? I mean, that was like almost like something dangerous. And I remember years ago when I was first invited to go to Saudi Arabia, years ago before all these changes happened, and they asked me my marital status, and I said I was a widow. And oh, well, this means that I would come in as an unaccompanied woman. And I thought, I just had this vision of myself on the carousel with all the unaccompanied bags going around and around, waiting for somebody to come pick me up. And I said, why is that a problem? Now, this was about 5 or 6 years ago. And the gentleman actually said to me, well, we're concerned about prostitution.
Oh.
I said, I've been waiting all my life to start my prostitution career. I think I might as well start it in Saudi Arabia. I couldn't believe what possessed me to say it. I was so shocked. Now, in Oman, it wasn't quite that bad. But in Oman, I was asked many times, why aren't you in Canada living with your son? You should be in Canada living with your son. Why? I'm able, I'm okay, I'm strong. I want to, that I didn't tell them that because I only have my son and my daughter-in-law left in Canada. My husband, all my family has passed away. I didn't want to sit in Vancouver and get depressed. So I thought, let me have an adventure. Let me take my company to the Middle East. I'd been dreaming about it for years. So let me do it. Knowing that there was going to be some cultural difference, obviously, because Oman is about 85% Omani, and that means Muslim. And that means dressed in abayas and hijabs, and the men in dishdashes. And there along come I, an older white woman. And I found it difficult. Now, I have many Omani clients, and I got along very well with them. But after 2 years of having problems, they wouldn't let me use my name for my company. I've been Kennedy Communication Studio forever. And now I just wanted to add international. And they said, you can't have that name. And I said, well, why not? And they said, well, somebody else might want it. Well, they can't have it. It's my name. But you don't argue, because that's part of crossing the culture. You don't argue. So finally, I just said, I can't wait any longer. And really, at 68 years of age, I said, I can't wait any longer. So just after my 69th birthday, I made my way into Dubai. And on my 70th birthday, I actually began the paperwork to register Kennedy Communication Studio International. And everybody in Dubai were like, oh, there's nobody like you here. And instead of it being like, why aren't you home? They were curious and wanted to know, like, why aren't you at home? Well, don't you get lonesome? Are you here all alone? That was the thing that they couldn't understand. But they've accepted me here. And so it's been different. But each part of the GCC, of the 6 countries in the GCC, have different expectations and different what they will allow. So Dubai, even if I were maybe in Abu Dhabi or one of the other Emirates, I would not quite have the same freedom. But the Sheikh of Dubai is a very forward-thinking man, and he's smart. He knows that, the whole world right now is coming to Dubai. I mean, when I lived in New York, New York was the city of dreamers. But today, Dubai is the city of dreamers. But there are people from India, from Pakistan, from Bengal, from Nepal, from all over. That's not Westerners, are not the big group of expats. So every time you turn around, it's a different culture that you're communicating with. And the Indian men are different than the Emirati men, and the Pakistani men are different than they are, and then they're all different. And then there's a lot of Filipinos, and they're different different. They're closer to Western. So every time you turn around, you have to readjust your behavior, the volume of your voice, the way in which you dress, all kinds of things depending on who you are. It's a constant change to have this intercultural dialogue.
And I want to interrupt you just a second there, Paddy, because I'm curious about something you said. You're referring they, and when you say they, as both women and men that approach you asking those questions, why you're alone, or where you don't feel lonesome, or is mostly men? This is one
No,
question.
the women too, but the men do it, if I may say, and I hope I'm not insulting any men because they're not all like this, but I'm going to use a broad brush.
Mm,
They're kind of concerned. Like,
I
you're here
see.
alone. This is the safest place in the world, really. Dubai is probably the safest city for women and children in the entire world. It's illegal
Mm,
to get a woman. So you can't call her
mhm,
names. You can't, it's illegal. You'll get deported. You'll go to jail. The women are like, really? You're here. You have your own company. How old are you? Really? How did you do that? And they want to know the story.
okay.
And the men, it's
Mhm.
not so much that they're judgmental. It's more their concern. Does your son come and live with you here? No, my son is a businessman in Canada. No, no. How do you do that? Aren't you afraid? No, I'm not afraid, especially here, because it
Mm,
is very, very safe. I can go at any time of the day or night. And I've
mm,
never ever going to say there's no harm. You can leave your wallet someplace and go back and it's right there. You can leave your phone in the cab and get somebody to phone the phone and the cab driver is going to bring you the phone. I've had all these things happen to me. I have a wallet in a store with all my cards, Canadian ID, UAE ID, cash. Got home the cab. I said to the cab driver, I don't have my wallet. He took me back. He wouldn't wait for me to pay. And it's like, no, go find your wallet. And I went back into the store and the wallet was right where I left it with everything in it.
this is
It's a very
very
safe
interesting.
place.
I want to ask you another question, but I want to go to Elizabeth now, into the aspect of Elizabeth, you being an American and you also global. You worked with the divas of the opera. This is a super challenge in terms of communication. And Austria, America. What are your challenges in terms of navigating your trainings, being able to perform you give your trainings, your coaching in these two environments? Is this different, or you have to adapt, or how do you feel that in those two environments?
Well, actually, I work mostly with the U.S. and European clients.
Mm,
So mostly because of the time zones, I don't deal with Asia. I just keep me to two main time zones. And so what I found is there are many universal things. I work a lot with helping women be heard, and it's half teaching women how to get men to listen to them and half teaching women how to not stand in their own way. So, and that's fairly universal. I also do a lot of work with people for whom English is not their first language. So I was in Silicon Valley in California for many years, and that's very international. A lot of people from all over the world. And I learned also in the opera that you work internationally. So pretty much everybody is coming from somewhere else. And you have to decide what is the language that you're going to speak. Everyone speaks two or three languages, and you just say on the first day of rehearsal, you will say, so are we going to be in English? Are we going to speak German? Are we going to speak Italian? Those are the three main languages. And the one that the most people speak the best is the one that you're going to use. So I'm working in other languages all the time. And as you two both know, when you're working bilingually in two languages, you wind up speaking a mishmash of both. Uh, I learned I learned a lot about how to communicate slowly and clearly. A lot of the work I do is helping people slow down, basically, and helping my clients address a if they're going to give a speech in English and it's not their first language, or it's not the first language of their listeners, which is most of the time, slow down. Choose words that people will understand. I had a Spanish client, a wonderful woman, who was so frustrated speaking English because in Spain, she's known for having wonderful images and metaphors and very colorful language. And she doesn't know how to do that in English. So what we did was we would have her practice her talking points in English and send them to me. She would speak them to me, and then I would go back and say, in English, you would say it this way. You know, how would you do that? One of the things working in German-speaking countries is that a lot of the things I'm trying to say are not translatable. So, you know, I've learned how not to use metaphors that don't make sense. And that's a thing. I was on a call with an Italian man who lives in London the other day, and he was talking about using a metaphor about buying a Hoover. And I interrupted and said, because I've known him for a long time, and I interrupted. I said, for the Americans on the call, he's talking about a vacuum cleaner. He'd never known that, but you know, Hoover is a brand name for a vacuum cleaner in England, and so in the UK, you talk about getting a Hoover to clean your carpet. So that's the sort of thing I work with. And because I've done so much of this, I tend to listen for it. Especially, I've got 3.5 years of podcast interviews now. I have a podcast for 3.5 years. And I'm very aware that many of my listeners do not have English as their first language. So often I will stop a speaker and say, try a different word, because it looks great on the page, but it's not gonna make sense when you say it. And absolutely, a listener is not going to understand that. So I think about that a lot. And that's something that I spend a lot of time helping people be aware of.
To find the right words, I would say, right? And you mentioned something very interesting there about this Spanish woman not feeling a bit frustrated of not having enough vocabulary to speak in a foreign language. And I can share here an experience I had in Toastmasters, that once the only competition of being Toastmaster was in Portuguese, because I was in Switzerland, and they wanted to have a competition in Portuguese, and then I signed up for it. And it was the first time that I had given a speech in Portuguese, in my language, and it was a huge difference. It was like as if the words were flowing naturally. Even people who were watching, who could not understand any word in Portuguese, told me that they could see a big difference in my body language, speaking my own language. And saying that, in that note, then I want to throw the ball to Paddy, because in such a diverse environment that you are now in Dubai, with all the difference, everybody, I assume, communicating in English, and with you, of course, and the women, I would like to you said you work mostly with women, and what exactly is the type of communication you offering them support for I understand these are professional women in their environment, because I in this so male dominated environment, what is this freedom of speech for this woman? What does that mean?
Well, first of all, it's a little bit, it's not exactly as we think in the West. The society
Mm,
has changed a lot. Years ago, when I spoke in Bahrain, I learned that the Queen of Bahrain is soaking just fortunes of money into developing women. The Sheikh of Dubai by 2030 wants 40% of boardrooms to be filled with women, but not just women because of their gender, but women who are trained. If you even see what's going on in Saudi Arabia, the prince there, the young prince, is making tremendous changes. So now is a great time in the Middle East to be a woman. I have a program that I work with women in leadership or not, entrepreneurs, women in leadership, and it's a program I wrote called Your Brave Voice. I'm a former radio journalist, so I teach people, and I think you might be in opera, Elizabeth, I don't know, but I teach people this magnificent instrument. But the first thing I do, look, now I've been 51 years coaching, although not always in communication, but the last 35 years in communication. And a lot with women because I'm just an old feminist and I really think that the world needs women. In 1993, when I was a radio journalist, I interviewed the Dalai Lama in Vancouver. And because I work with Broadcast News, which is a big company there, the major radio broadcast company, I had a long interview with him. And so we were just chatting about this and that. And I said to him, what do you think is the biggest peril or the biggest problem facing humanity right now? And he said, it is men in power, not men in power and their love of war toys. They will take us to the brink of destruction. And, and it will be the women of the world who will bring us back. And I said, how? And he said, with your voice. I thought, oh, isn't that interesting? So that was really the nugget that start. But in 1993, nobody knew me. I mean, now that we have internet and I have an international reputation, so now I can really get this program going. It took me a long time. I was in New York and I've created a program for young girls at risk from Harlem, primarily African American and Hispanic girls, in serious risk of being brought into gangs and whatnot. I was going to teach them kind of follow the coach. I was the communication coach. I was going to sort of follow like a Toastmasters thing. So the very first day I mentioned Toastmasters, and up goes this little tiny black can. She said, Miss Patty, we object to the word master, you know. I said, well, of course you do, baby. I mean, okay, God help me now. Like, what am I going to do? My whole plan went out the window. And the second day I went there was a young girl in the class. She was about 15, and she came in and she had been beaten up. And it was just after 9/11. And she'd been beaten up. And I said, what happened? And she said, some boys at school beat me up. And I said, why? And she said, because she was a little Muslim girl. And she said, because they said I was bin Laden's daughter. And I thought, well, I just said to her, well, honey, you can't fix stupid. But in that moment, I thought, these kids don't know how to give a speech. So it just came to me literally like a bolt of
mm,
lightning. You have to know what they hold to be true, beautiful, and good. So that was the next step in building this program as per the Dalai Lama. But I still didn't know where I was going with it, right? And then about 3 years ago, I've been coached all my life. I still have coaches. And my coach said, oh, this leadership that you talk about, Patty, you light up like a Christmas tree when you talk about women and voice. Why don't you write a program? And I started thinking about it. And I thought, well, I don't want to call it your authentic voice. I mean, authentic. What does it even mean now? It's just a word, right? And I thought, what does it mean to be authentic? And I thought of my girls in Harlem, that it takes guts, it takes bravery. So I started researching, and I discovered that many studies show that roughly 75% of the time when women are in the minority, we will remain silent. We don't
mm,
speak.
yeah.
And I began asking women, and then also in Eastern Europe, Toastmasters asked me, would I write a program for women in leadership. And I discovered that the reason they weren't stepping up for they didn't think that they were smart enough, they didn't know enough, not enough, not enough, not enough, not enough, until finally I said, you are enough. That was the next step. And then, as I said, the coach said, you need to write a program. So I just put it all together, did my research, and I thought, I've got to help women before I can teach them how to play the magnificent instrument, the most magnificent instrument, a wind instrument and a stringed instrument at the same time, but instrument to play. But before I can teach them that, I got to get in there and help them find the courage, the chutzpah, the guts to speak. So when I say, and I'm very sad to say this, but when I say to women, who stole your voice? I'm going to tell you that at least 25% of the time, it'll be a story similar to, well, when I was a little girl and I was raped or I was beat up, and he told me if I told anyone, he was going to kill me and kill my family. And there were just story after story. Here in the Middle East, while it took me 3 years to do my PhD, because every time I went to defend it, the professor said, I'll make sure you fail unless you sleep with me. So I just backed down. I mean, and a lot of times it was sexual. It was some kind of sex, not always, but a lot of times. And I thought, well, no wonder. And then that they don't want to be made a fool of. Who does she think she is? Oh, that voice against all these things. We're either not enough or we're too much. And I thought, okay, I know that the human voice, any emotion that we're holding on to, as soon as I raise the shoulders, my voice changes. I wanted them to be able to access that vibration, that lower register of their voice, so that they would be heard. Because as you were talking about, Elizabeth, they need to speak to be heard, and because you got to be heard to be seen. And if you want to get anywhere in the world as a woman, you got to speak up. They got to hear you, otherwise they won't see you. And if they don't see you, you're never going to get the promotion. You're never going to get noticed.
Elizabeth was going to ask a question. And then I go.
Well, I would just write a comment to say what makes the difference, I find, is to have allies. And so that you have allies who will stop you when you are doing some of the limiting behaviors, like if you say sorry, excuse me, sorry all the time, but also to have allies who can say, go for it. That's why I do a group program, because I've discovered it really helps to have a group who says, yes, you can do this. Yep. And, women tend to be relational. Men tend to be individualistic. Women tend to be relational. So having the relationships and the allies who will help you, also the allies who will speak up on your behalf if someone is talking over you, things like that. There are lots of ways of being heard, but it really helps to have someone who says, speak up, I've got your back. And if they shout you down, I'll still have your back.
Absolutely.
And we all know that, when someone else says, yes, Tulia had a great idea. Tulia, please tell us more. Having a third party endorse you is very important and very helpful.
Yeah.
And it is a tightrope.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm curious then, because in our Western part of the world, even this Western part of the world, from my understanding, Paddy, you can correct me, because as I said, I don't know this part of the world. I have it's maybe my bias to believe that we have more space to speak up. How is it there for these women? Because you said there are a lot of incentives and programs to give them the space, not only the space to make the numbers, but really to speak up. And my question would be, how much really can they speak up in such environment?
So that's a bias that we have.
Yes.
And that's a bias I came here with. And I was afraid to come here on my own because of no. So the world is changing here very, very quickly. So I introduced Your Brave Voice to a mixed audience in Saudi Arabia, and I found out at the last minute that they were going to be men. And I just thought, oh my God, this is kind of a feminist program, and So I started out, I said, before I start this evening, I'd like to address the brothers. And I want you to know that although this is somewhat of a feminist program, it's really to encourage women to uncover their voices and to speak from their truth, to stand upon their truth. It's not that we want to compete with you or walk ahead of you. And you know we will no longer walk behind you. We just want to walk shoulder to shoulder. And at the end of that presentation, the majority of comments were men. And they were thanking me. And they were saying, and I've had many men in the Middle East say this, I'm so happy to hear you're doing this program because we can't keep taking all the burden. I want my wife to speak up. I want my daughters to speak up. I want my mom to speak up. I don't want my mom to always say, don't worry about me, I'm okay. I want my mom to say, I'm not okay, and this is what I need. So they were, that just shocked me because, as I told you, 5 years before, they didn't want me to come into the country without somebody to pick me up at the airport because I was a danger being a woman on my own. So it's really changed. And one of the best examples I have, see, I was a feminist in the 70s and I in the days when women were burning their bra, but I always say, but I didn't burn my bra because my mom would have killed me. But my mom was a feminist, but I didn't burn my bra. So here, there's a feminist movement, but it's not like what we know. They're quiet about it. They're not making noise. They're not screaming in the streets. They're not marching. So I have one client, oh my God, I love her so much. So she makes good money. And so she was out one day with her husband and they saw this sofa. And she loved the sofa. I don't need the sofa. We got a sofa anyway. She said, well, I really like it, I think. So anyway, no, yeah, we sort of typical kind of male attitude here. And so a few weeks later, she bought the sofa. And he comes home from work and he's, I didn't want that sofa. She says, well, don't you? It's awfully nice, don't you think? And so a few days later, he's sitting on the sofa. He's got his feet up. He's got the remote. She says, oh, I see you're really enjoying the sofa. That war was over. She did the same thing with the refrigerator. All the fancy bells and, yeah, we don't need it. She's so he comes home from work. There's the refrigerator. He's getting ice out of the ice side. And he got it. She says, oh, I see you're rather enjoying the refrigerator. Now that is different how I think we would do it. I will speak for myself. I would have dug in. You can't tell me I make my that, but no, they have a very different way of doing it. So there is still a lot of change to come on, but I do work with men. I'm an equal opportunity coach, but I do love to work with women here because even they want their daughters, they want their mothers, they want different. So that notion that, they're all veiled and they can't speak is really, I'm sure there are some cases of that, but it's not, it's a bias that we carry.
Mm.
As I was saying before we started, sorry, that it's here. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go finish, and then I ask you a question.
As I was mentioning before we started, women are very safe here. It's illegal to yell at a woman. You can't
Yeah, but
call her.
there's one thing you said there. Oh, the men come and say we want them to take over, but from my perspective, doesn't matter where you are, and I want to view on that. To make it happen, it requires more than just wanting. You need to be able to build the environment where they would feel confident and safe to speak up. Because even here in this part of the world, and Elizabeth, I believe she will agree with me, we hear this in the companies we go, the men saying, well, no, we want them to speak up, but in their daily dynamics, in the culture of the company environment, it's very difficult for these women, highly qualified, very experienced, not women with shy away with problems, these other problems that you mentioned, some women have that we know. But I'm talking about women like us that have a voice, and it's still because the environment does not provide the space for really women be able to speak up. So then say, let's say I want my daughter, my wife, and my other women around me to speak up and take over. It's is the wanting, but what is being doing,
I
what even like in the conversation with the man, this is like what, going back to what Elizabeth said, to find the allies, because I think there are many good men out there that really want to take the burden, but also they don't know how to, because they also are victim of this toxic male environment.
absolutely.
Uh,
But there
could
is
I
evidence
address that for a
of
minute?
Yes.
Is that I think of it as a language issue, and
Mm.
so I'm used to working internationally. I'm used to working in multiple languages. The language that people don't notice is some people call it men's language versus women's language. I like to think of it as single focused and multi-focused. So a single focused is mostly men, and men who are, they're focused on one thing and they get it done, which is great. That's how things get done. But they're blind to outside issues, or something coming in from the side that might derail them. The women see lots of possibilities, or the multi-focused people see lots of possibilities, but have a hard time saying it clearly and concisely so that a man can hear it.
Mm.
And I know plenty of women who are single focused and have to be single focused if they rise high in an organization. Basically, being single focused saves time, so it's faster. So what I find is that teaching the multi-focused women to stick to one thing, and say one thing at a time, rather than saying 5 things at a time, which is the way women talk to other women. And it takes some practice, but it actually works.
Mm.
Mhm.
Just saying something that in terms of what you're saying, that we are also, I think, confirming that, yes, in the male environment, we women need to learn how to speak more concisely in order to sit at the table and be heard.
Western business was built by men.
Exactly.
So,
So
yes.
the pros, yes, and we know that. But the transition, I think what we are all aiming for, and what our work, the three of us here, and many women out there, is to help to this transition where a different type of communication will be created, I think, because we'll be women, yes, adapting, not being so all social spoken kind of a
Mhm.
style, and men
Yeah.
also allowing to learn to listen a more diverse way of communication. So how do you feel that in that environment, Paddy, or something, this
It's
transition, how
really
do you see it?
interesting. It's
Hmm?
really interesting because when I'm in the West, I really understand what Elizabeth is saying, and I can relate to it exactly. And I wonder, and this is just a guess as I'm sitting here, um, it's been such a long time since women in this part of the world have been able to speak that they don't go on and on. They're very good at, they get their little sound bites in. I think for a long time they've just been living in sound bites. So they don't have that on and on and on. They do when they're with their girlfriends, but when a man or in that group work, they seem to be, no, I'm not there with them, but I know what their bosses say about them. And there is plenty of evidence that they are being given ample time to speak and that they are listened to. The thing that's really important here is it's not just for women to come to the table, but they must come to the table with something to say. So training here is really, really important. And the universities focus on this kind of stuff. So it's, I think, and I'm not certain, as I say, it's a guess, but when you've been silenced for a long time, because the bias just didn't fall out of the sky, the bias is based on historical evidence. And I'm just wondering if when it's been that way for so long. You saw your mother, your grandmother be silenced, and now you're the one that's going to come out and speak. You're probably watching your words and not pushing the envelope too much, just saying what needs to be said and going on. Because I don't see, I know what you're talking about, Elizabeth, but I don't think that I'm experiencing that here. I've been totally surprised. I really thought that I was going to get the veils off, and no, 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 no. These women are like we are. They just express themselves differently, but they express themselves. And just one last thing about the evidence. So I do this in groups, and mainly in the corporate world, Your Brave Voice. And so a group that I worked with a lot in Bahrain, and they finished, and they were all of a sudden, I said they weren't talking at meetings, and they were sitting there and they had the answer, but they were letting the man or young man next to them say what they wanted to say, and they were kicking themselves. And so I like, okay, you got to get your courage up, support each other, say it. And so two of them came back afterwards because I follow up and see how they're doing. And the boss, the CEO, now he is a Brit and he's youngish, he's early 50s. He said to these two young women, "How long have you been with the company?" And one said 12 years and the other said 8 years. And he said, "I'm so sorry." He said, "Were you in that program for Women in Voice?" And they said, "Yes." And he said, "I'm so sorry because I never noticed you before. I never saw you before. I'm so embarrassed." He said, "But now they're giving presentations, they've got their hand up, they're being listened to." So I do think it's a relatively new concept here. And I do think that the door is open. And I'm telling you, the world is changing here for the men. Here's another example. The young men, they're waiting for what's called wasta, which is you get a job because your dad had a job. The girls have never had this opportunity. Or you get a job because the sultan or the sheikh or the prince or whatever provides work for men. But it's not happening anymore because Oman and Saudi Arabia are 50% unemployment in their youth. So I work with young women and say, "Mom, don't find me a husband because I don't want to marry a boy. I want to marry a man. I don't want to marry a boy that's waiting at home for Worcester, and you're just going to build him a house on the complex, and I'm going to go on the compound, I'm going to go live there. I want a man." And you know what? The statistics show who are starting the most businesses as entrepreneurs in this part of the world are the young women, because there's nobody giving them a handout. And they're, as we say here, halas, they're not waiting. So they're stepping into it, and it's kind of a novelty, whereas for us, it's not. It's kind of old now, and everybody kind of knows the tricks of the game. I mean, yeah, men say in Canada, like in Canada, women and men have equal pay. Right? How many cases are there in court? The law says it, but it doesn't happen. In Oman, there are more women with PhDs and master's degrees than men. You look at the universities, and there's a higher enrollment of women than the men. They have Omani Women's Day. Omani women are paid the same as men. There's no discussion. There's no going to court. It just is. You have to do it. It's the law. So we have a lot of biases, I think, unconscious biases about this part of the world. And I'm happy to say it's changing, and I love being here. I'm surprised and I love it.
Excellent to know. It made me curious. And I want to throw the ball to Elizabeth now. And I want to ask you, Elizabeth, in your world and in between your two worlds of Austria and in America, of course, you go to several different places, but in all your global encounters, how do you tackle this conversation when you recognize a bias in between in the groups that you're working? How do you deal with the situation, and what are the common unconscious bias we have? All of us, we all biases, so from one way or another, and we go learning and then we go improving, but we do have biases, everybody. And in your environment, Elizabeth, what are the most common bias that you find in this relationship, women and men, communication, business, leadership, and how do you deal with it? What whatever kind of suggestions even you give to your trainees, your coachees, and people you work with?
Well, my program is called Visible and Valued. So how do you become visible and then show them how valued you are? The biases are usually unconscious biases against women that, oh, she wouldn't want that job because she's not going to want to move. Or, so we're not even going to offer her the job. It's men who get promoted by other men. There's one of the biases that's been known of in the startup tech community for some time is that women are asked when you've got a man and a woman in front of doing a pitch in front of a group of investors, the man will answer predictive questions. So what are the potentials you have? What are all the things that you might do? The women are asked preventive questions. And because we are socialized this way, the women are the ones who have plan B, plan C, plan D. The men are never asked that. The men are going to say, so what are you going to do when this succeeds, when your new software succeeds? So the idea is to be aware of that and say, well, here's what I'm going to do, da, 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 da. Or within an organization, when you apply for a promotion or a raise or a new job, to understand who you're talking to and phrase it in a way that they can hear it. So it's a matter, there are a lot of pieces of it because we've had centuries of women not speaking up and women being told to be quiet and decorative. And so, the good thing is in the West now, we've had all the years since women's liberation in the 1970s, we've had a whole generation that's grown up saying, okay, there are models, there are women that we can model. Our mothers weren't able to do that. And to say, and to then be able to say, and where am I sabotaging myself? Where am I being safe? Imposter syndrome always comes up when we are stretching.
Yeah.
And I have to remind myself that because I get it all the time. The voices in my head are always saying, oh, too fast, don't try it. You won't be able to do this. And just recognizing is, okay, this is just a sign that I am stretching.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, based on what you said, came to my mind here while listening to you, is to think that in Switzerland, I lived there, there's still many women in the interview is asked, what are you going to do with your children when you work? So, and I find that these kind of questions very provocative. I think they have a meaning behind, that's my own perception, that's not only the interest of having the answer for this question, but it's knowing that such question is so annoying and disrespectful as a professional, that in a way destabilize the person in the interview. The same as I had once in one training, one of my trainees came to me after the break. She said, I just got into my mails and we are discussing this very important topic and negotiating with my team, and my manager comes, and the first thing I sent an email, the first thing I see in his reply is, you are too emotional. This is another sentence that I believe I say is like in boxing, punching below the belt. It's really disqualifying. It's not a real comment with the meaning of the comment is really to unstabilize you. What do you view on these kind of situations? What do you tell a woman in this situation to do? I'll be curious. Any of you?
Patty, go ahead.
I had a woman come in from Ukraine, and she worked for an international paint company. She was just gorgeous, and she just looked like a palette. And her boss said to her one day, "Quit bringing your woman to work."
Mm.
What does that mean? So we had a good laugh about it. And her choice was she just looked at him and she said, "Really? Nothing. I'm bringing my woman to work. I'm a
Hmm.
woman." And that was it. And he was, I don't think he tried that again because he was immediately really embarrassed. Those kinds of conversations, they're very difficult. It's very true. We've got to, I think that women, first of all, when I hear it, I think, well, this is the argument for training, teaching our boys. I
Mm,
mean, it's got to start by teaching the men that from a young age that you just don't get this out. This is not working. This is caveman stuff, and stop it. And I think that we put so much of the onus on girls to answer these difficult questions when really we need to be teaching the boys and we need to hold the men accountable. Now, that doesn't help in that exact moment when she's asked that. But that's where I think bravery comes through. That's where you've got to know who you are. You've got to know what is your truth that you stand upon. Who are you? What do you believe? And then at that point, using your voice properly, you just say whatever it is that's honest to you, what's your truth in that moment. And if they don't like it here, if that happens, you can't go to any buddy to there's no counsel or anything that you can say he said this to me and there's none
Mm.
of that. There's you're on your own, right? But
mm,
so with the student that kept putting off the PhD, I said to her, "You need to do an active power." And she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "When he tells you this year that if you don't sleep with him, you just say, 'I dare you, I dare you.'" And that's what she did. And he was silent. Now, that's not everybody can do that. But see, this is why I wanted to focus on the bravery.
mm,
Who are you? What do you hold about yourself to be true, beautiful, and good? And you declare it, and you say it to yourself every day, and you write it all the time. And if you can say it to him, or maybe you got to go into the bathroom and say it to yourself in front of the mirror, but you walk out of there tall, and you'll find your way of being truthful about it. And sometimes you're going to win, sometimes you're going to lose. But if it happens enough, you'll get to a point, and if you know your truth, you don't have to give them one of these. You can be a strong woman, feminine, and say whatever it needs. That question is really none of your business. Or I had one woman
absolutely.
that said, "Well, I won't call you to do childcare." I mean, how can we take it seriously? And so this is why do we take it seriously? What a stupid question. What are you going to do with your children? What do you do with your children?
And
I
why
mean,
do we take it
but so
personally?
that's really important. And so it's so important to me that I don't care if the woman wears an abaya or a mini skirt. I don't care where she comes from. You have the God given right to stand there and do an act of power. You do not have to give in to these people. You have to believe in yourself. You have to know yourself. If you don't know yourself, you'll never be able to do an act of power. One of my clients in a big multinational corporation, she was being bullied and sexually harassed. She went to the GM. So what did he do? Told all the men. Now they're all
Hmm.
laughing at her. She's a good Muslim. And we worked really hard on this. And I said, "Listen, it's time for you. You've got to do an act of power. How long are you going to let these guys?" I met her. She weighed about 75 pounds. I looked at her. I didn't know I upset her, but I said, "I can see such sadness in your eyes. Why are you letting this happen?" And I didn't know it really upset her. I didn't mean to upset her. And that started our relationship. We still work together. And she's going through another issue at the same company, and she says, "I'm going to do an act of power, and this time I think I'm going to leave them high and dry and walk out." And I said, "Well, whatever. But how long? Why do we take it? That's the question. Not why do they say it. Why do I entertain
Hmm.
something? And if I don't know who I am, and if I'm a scaredy cat because I don't know, then they're going to keep running us over. But when we stand there in our truth, in our beauty, in our innate goodness, and we just, whatever comes. It doesn't have to be pre-planned, but I always encourage my women clients, just, why are you taking it personally? It has nothing to do with you. It's him. Like, what an idiot, really. You might not want to tell him he's an idiot, but maybe you do. I don't know. Maybe you're going to lose. But for me, I believe too, I'm very fatalistic. If you lose that job, that's okay. At the end of the day, you're going to find a job where you can go home happy, which is more important than pleasing this dude. So for me, it's really about bravery for women.
Bravery. And Elizabeth, what is your view on that? What is your experience?
I sort of lost the track of what was the original question. Sorry.
The original question was when these women that we know they're strong, they're well capable, they're excellent at what they do, but they still keep receiving comments, you're too emotional, or what are you going to do in a job application? What are you going to do with your family? And we know that these questions are not really looking for an answer; they are more provocative. And
I would just stand up and say, look at the results I've produced, and look at the job I've done, and the recommendations that I'm bringing. What do I do with my family? Well, the same thing that you do with your family. It's the same problem. Or, if you're too emotional, then privately, without embarrassing anyone else, you just say, I am a woman. This is a strength that I'm using my leadership skills and my people skills to connect with our team. And that is a benefit to the organization because it's going to slow turnover. So, this is going to keep the good people here because I'm using my emotional intelligence. So things like that. It's, most of the time people are aware of that. And then, it might just be, I think often it's habit. And then you could just say afterwards, I said, do you realize that you just disrespected me in that meeting and I'm your boss? Then please pay attention next time.
yeah.
That, and having an ally in the room who can say, that has nothing to do with it. Paddy's going to be the perfect candidate for this, that sort of thing. So it's becoming visible and showing your value and asking for what you want.
Yeah. The power asking as well. Yes, I would summarize from my side saying that the problem is that I believe these women sometimes they're just so tired of being put in such a situation that sometimes it gets into their nerves and they lose their center. But because it's exhausting to always be in a position that that you always have to be there, marking your territory, right? I mean, pushing and pushing and pushing like this. This is why we need to communicate, to build these communities, these supports, these allies, and start bringing these conscious conversations to companies, to people beyond the work, but where women feel that they need to speak up, they need to express themselves, and with because they're also behind the need of being nice and to please, not being the person that is disrupting. And I think we need to be disruptive sometimes.
I
And we
agree.
just be
Allies.
disruptive
Get
and
your
make
allies in there to help
us to drop. But I
Yep.
also believe that it comes with age, ladies,
you.
because when we get to our certain age as well, we have been through so much, and then we say, okay, for God's sake, but we need to support those youngs there to get together and get their lives and start changing this conversation. So I want us to finish that. The conversation could continue here for a long time, and I just want to continue to ask you your final message to the audience there in terms of we are all in this global global environments. We have intercultural communications every day. what would be your one tip to be aware of for building a communication, because communication is about connection, building bridges in such environments? What would be your one tip to the audience? Elizabeth, you start now.
I would say know your audience. Know your audience.
That's my mantra
And
too.
yes, and speak to what it is that they care about. It doesn't change what you want to say. You just phrase it in a way that they can hear you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Paddy?
Well, George Bernard Shaw said the biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has happened. And I think that we have to remember that just because I said it doesn't mean it was heard. And I think when we're crossing cultures and crossing genders and boundaries, etc., we really have to be aware of our own stereotypes. We have to work hard to understand what are our unconscious bias. We have to listen to answer. I mean, not to answer, but listen to understand. We have to quit looking at everything from our own glasses, because in today's world it's so multicultural, that we've just and we got the four agreements. Also, the four agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz always work. Speak impeccably, don't take things personally, don't make assumptions, and do your best however that may be. So I think if we're just aware that just because we said it doesn't mean it's been understood. And I agree with you, Elizabeth. Les Brown says one of the biggest mistakes that speakers make is they get too hung up on what they think they should say, and not enough. They don't think enough of what their audience needs and wants to hear. So know your audience and know who you are and acknowledge who you are, and you're crossing a culture. So
Very well, ladies. Elizabeth, you have the same mantra as I have, know your audience. And Patty, you remind me something that I've learned recently, that it's another mantra, which is assumptions is the mother of all fuck ups. Always ask.
it is.
Always ask.
It's true. And even Don Miguel said that that was the biggest fourth of the four agreements. That's the one, because we get it wrong, because we're always looking at it through our own lens, assuming, and we know nothing.
Awareness is everything.
It is indeed. Self-awareness and awareness of what's around you. Yeah.
Ladies, thank you so much. We reached 1 hour. We could continue, and I think we should continue this conversation in the near future. Thank you so much for being here with me, and I hope you have enjoyed it. And greetings to Dubai. I hope to be able to go there one day. And if you're there, Paddy, love to meet you in person. And Elizabeth, we should meet up soon. You should come to Barcelona. You're close by.
We've got to get back into the same country again. So yes,
exactly.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thank you so much, ladies.
You both can help me with my retreat company, because I really want to have retreats in communication, strategic communication, voice. That's what my whole thing about being here. So I'm always looking for collaboration to help people, men and women, just express themselves, because I always say the world is the future. One of my coaches and colleagues, James McNeil, says the future belongs to the communicator. And it does.
The communicator.
Yes.
I agree. Thank you so much, Paddy. And definitely,
thank you, Julia.
Bye to all of you.
Too.